When you're asked a question, instead of responding with information, how do you respond using stories, which enable you to sound more articulate and engaging? In fact, to help you understand actionable techniques that you can utilize to do this, we're going to break down the communication style of Vinod Khosla. He's an Indian-American billionaire businessman, someone who has a fascinating story himself and has a thirst for information.
When I was 16, I'd go from Delhi cantonment, where I lived, to Old Delhi to rent old magazines. That's how you got access to information. There was no place to go to get access to magazines or others unless you could afford to buy them, and we couldn't.
And he did a podcast recently, which when I watched, I was pleasantly surprised by how articulate of a speaker he really is. And a lot of the principles that we teach in our classes, a lot of the techniques on storytelling, on structuring, on articulate speaking, was seamlessly being applied by him. Probably because he's someone who's in the media eye a lot.
Do you do a lot of these interviews?
I do a fair number.
So in this video, we're going to get into how to articulate a response using storytelling when someone disagrees with you, how to articulate concepts in a more engaging manner using narrative techniques, and a storytelling tool to use in any setting to sound more persuasive. By the way, if you're new here, hi, my name is Radeep from Frantically Speaking. We release communications content regularly, so if you're into that, hit subscribe. And if you want to take your communications learning to the next level, you can click the link in the description, check out our courses, and see if we can work together. And by the way, if you want us to break down an other celebrity or personality and make a communications video on them, comment that celebrity down below. If we get multiple comments of the same people, we might just make that video. So let's first break down the concept of how to disagree with somebody utilizing storytelling. And the best thing that I liked about this particular technique is how non-confrontational it really is. So in the interview, Vinod Khosla is asked a question on data privacy. And Nikhil Kamath, who's interviewing him, goes on to say that if Facebook is taking my data and selling it to other companies, I would want a piece of Facebook's revenue. And watch how he responds.
Reid Hoffman has a new book called Super Agency. If you read it, he talks about the fact that, if you ask people the following question, at what price would you not use Facebook, right? Like how much would you pay if I said, I'm taking it away, but you can get it back if you pay for it? And it's like $40 or $50 a month. How much does Facebook make from you per month on average? About $40 or $50 a year. So you're getting, pick a number, $600 worth of value, and they're getting $50 worth of value in a year. What is a fair exchange? Everybody has the option to not buy into these services. Now, there's lots of nuances, but is an economic surplus created? Yes.
Now, the technique that was used over here is known as reframing. It basically means we look at a particular situation from a different angle entirely, which helps us to look at it from a different perspective and hence can help to persuade the other person to come on our side, even if we disagree with them at first. In this case, he reframed the narrative and spoke about an example of his daily life. So he reframed the question and looked at it from a different perspective that allows the other person to buy into your argument a lot more. And by utilizing the story of how, firstly taking an example of Reid Hoffman's book, and then talk about how Facebook actually does share its revenue with you by providing you services for free as opposed to charging you for it, actually made me think while I was watching the podcast that, oh yeah, again, there are a lot more nuances in this entire conversation, but I can see where the argument can start to make a little more sense. Not that I agree with it or anything, but it's a good technique to utilize for different situations. Because in daily life as well, even if we remove the concept of large-scale storytelling, reframing can still be utilized very effectively. For example, if someone comes and tells you that, oh, the presentation did not go well, I really messed up. We can say things like, oh, it happens, it's okay, maybe you'll do better next time. But again, if we reframe it, then we can make our statement more convincing. For example, we could say, true, it wasn't perfect, but now we've learned what not to do, which is exactly how great presenters refine their style. Or for example, if someone tells us that, hey, I get nervous speaking in front of people, we can reframe it and say, people tend to feel nervous because they care. and that energy, if channeled correctly, will make the delivery much more passionate. And we've noticed reframing in these situations tend to make your overall communication come across as not just more articulate, but a lot more persuasive as well. But what if you do want to get a little deeper into the concept of storytelling? That's why I'm going to talk about the concept of analogies. So in the interview, Vinod Khosla has asked a question that what makes a good entrepreneur? Now, instead of listing out a bunch of facts, he states an analogy.
Imagine you want to climb Mount Everest, and you have two people setting out. And one says, I'll get to base camp, then to camp 1, camp 2, camp 3. I think there's camp 4 and then the peak, right? It's not a straight path.
Right.
Another entrepreneur says, I'm going to get the most revenue in year 2, year 1 and year 2. They won't go to camp 1, base camp or camp 1. They'll pick the highest peak that doesn't then lead to something beyond. The path to Everest through these camps is very strategically picked to have the long-term vision of getting to Everest. Most people maximize revenue for the short term and are not thinking strategically. So the strategic entrepreneurs will do better. The entrepreneurs who pick better employees, who help them think through strategy, will do better. So people selection or team building will become the most important characteristic where the AI technology is democratized, if you believe it's democratized.
By giving the analogy of climbing Mount Everest, it makes the entire concept, even though it's very simple, very clear to the listener itself. Similarly, when some people tend to ask us that before they join our training that, hey, will going through a training really help improve my communications? Now, we can give a list of examples like, oh yes, it will, because you learn this technique and that technique and you get a platform to practice on, and other people have done it as well. To simply give an analogy really helps break down that clarity. What we do is we give the analogy of going to a gym. So for example, if you're someone who's really unfit and you get a gym membership and you go to the gym just once a week for 9 months straight, you will be healthier than where you were when you started off. Now, you make that once a week into 3 times a week. And along with that, you also manage your diet and your sleep. You will see faster and more efficient results. Same thing applies to communication training or any skill that you look to develop. The more you practice the right techniques, and as long as you're getting feedback from the correct people, you will see results over a period of time. And that works way better than providing people with information. But what if we were to break down storytelling into smaller, more bite-sized techniques that you can utilize even in a simple sentence? Forget an analogy or an entire narrative. So in the interview, Nikhil Kamath asks him about the important qualities that he thinks of when he thinks of a good entrepreneur. And here's what he says.
On the entrepreneur side, I look at the question, who thinks from first principles? Who's not scared of hardship? Because the entrepreneurial roller coaster has lots of highs and lows. And who has the fastest learning rate?
If you noticed, he followed a principle called the rule of 3, which is a very fundamental principle of communications and public speaking, which can be utilized in any aspect of communication.
On the entrepreneur side, I look at the question, who thinks from first principles? Who's not scared of hardship? Because the entrepreneurial roller coaster has lots of highs and lows. And who has the fastest learning rate?
And the reason for this is that 3 is the smallest number that we need to create a pattern. If we say something once, it's an incident. If we say something twice, it's a coincidence. And if we say something 3 times, it becomes a pattern. And with humans, we tend to find something magical in the number 3. We're able to remember concepts a lot more. And when we are trying to persuade somebody, instead of speaking in a factor of 1, when we speak in a factor of 3, we're going to sound a lot more persuasive. For example, if someone asks us, hey, how can I become a better communicator? Instead of just saying that you need to focus on your confidence, or we give a whole list, you need to focus on your body language, on your structuring, on your articulation, on your grammar, on your interpersonal skills, we just stick to 3 points. Focus on 3 things: clarity in your words, confidence in your delivery, and connection with your audience. And that becomes a lot easier for the listener to remember as well. And this can be applied in interviews as well. Let's say if you were in an interview and you were asked, how do you tend to prioritize tasks when there are multiple important things going on simultaneously? Now, there is one way of responding by saying things like, I'll ensure that I look at the matters which are more urgent than the others. I'll look at the timelines and maybe delegate things across. Or instead, we can just use the rule of 3 by saying, I look at 3 things: urgency, impact, and alignment with team goals. With urgency, I'll check which tasks are coming up first. Impact, I'll focus on the work that will create the biggest difference if completed. And with alignment, I'll make sure the task contributes directly to our team or company priorities. And that becomes a much cleaner way to respond. So utilizing these principles of reframing, analogies, and the rule of 3 will not only help us incorporate storytelling in our daily lives, but also help our responses become a lot more articulate and persuasive. In fact, we've created an entire video on how you can respond articulately in almost any setting. And this time we've used an entertainer to break down. You can check out that whole video of Priyanka Chopra right here.